The dark hole. A leap in our life is the absence thereof of a certain person from our lives. It's a gap more akin to an absence of light feeling, where you would be made to be left out in limbo, while time slows down on you, making your past and present have a hand in your own future. That they would be determining your fate by themselves, like you would have already given up your free will in order that you might be able to use that as a kid would use his excuses to make their cause of distress rethink their actions. It is not a problem that can apply to any kid. Only those who have lived their life thinking that they deserve good treatment or nothing more than existing in the life of their parents. A kid who would be put to such a test of being forced to enter limbo would have an attitude towards limbo as a child would have it. He would unknowingly forget that they are still under the care of a merciful God, one who wouldn't leave his creation, since all creation are his servants, alone, crying out when the spiritual world was made to feel void of meaning, out of effects of the dwellers of Hades, as is the case with a generation of kids who are taught to base reality upon what we would see in movies. Out of the effects of the movie thus alluded to, we are forced to think that people can die while they are still alive. In other words, they would still be there in life. You could see them in a physical form if circumstances allow that to happen. If a social relationship, this would also be akin to a family issue. This can easily go towards mourning a lost one. But what if by separation one is forced to live above the grave and another one under it? What if by separation a person is compelled to search for another meaning in their life? Meaning would be contested in a matter of seconds. What is meaning? The feeling of losing a sense of meaning is a similar conundrum. It is also somewhat reasonable that having such a joyous time analyzing reality and circumstances can also be akin to a miracle of wonder. Is it through metacognition that we are able to achieve feelings or sensations? It's not sadness that is caused by the separation of a loved one. It's an emptiness that would feel like a carved up wormhole through a place in space. It feels more like having been deprived forcefully from something you had or you owned. If the force was applied by your own actions and decision making, then it is no wonder that you would be holding your actions and your decision making accountable for your own demise. It is a wonderful yet oblivious thing to attempt to do, because you can't hold the unseen accountable for your personal actions. What even constitutes your personal action at that point? If your decisions are being questioned by your own self, then what guilt would you have at the end of the day? It would be very easy to complain upon death to God, saying, I didn't do that, lying to him, and I was compelled to do it, inventing more and more complications in the already established principle. It was your fault, but you keep trying to avoid it by finding excuses. Do you not know that being held accountable for your actions is a luxury that only God would be able to do? It is the end-time judgment court that matters, and from such a perception, people should view their world. There will be witnesses against you, and there will be witnesses with you. No one can ever be a witness against him. What kind of belief system should one have when they are tested with a feeling of despair? It was not the feeling of despair, however, it was more a birth of chaos. within the individual, causing them to taste the feeling of having assigned more value to a relationship with another partner above his relationship with God. It is no wonder that he would be infused with anger at the time, as though he was challenging all the different demons to duel in such an abysmal state of despair. Would the world survive a tyrant? It would survive a tyrant. Would the world survive a righteous man who is suddenly and out of foolishness, ingratitude, and mental fatigue became a rebel against God? If a ruler who was extremely pious and righteous suddenly became an oppressor, is detestable and discouraging to remain a blessing. If when struck by a calamity, a righteous believer becomes a tyrant, then the world itself would need to change form in a speedily manner. At times, multiple universes and multiple dimensions would pass through the eyes of the perceiver, as though he is running through their lifeline attempting to find a reason not to allow a quantum split in the universe itself. Since the world would need to change for the perceiver at times of trial and tribulation, it would be extremely boring to have the ruler's desires be fulfilled while the people are dying, starving, or thirsty. In other words, if a nation is doomed to be ruled by a tyrant, then it would possibly not be a tyrant by our modern definitions, but rather a tyrant as an alternate personality disorder, where a person who is deemed to have a split personality disorder would be compelled to unleash the beast onto their surroundings. When multiple personalities are at one's disposal, it would be the most dangerous man alive. If every human was equipped with a certain number of personalities that would allow them to rationalize certain explanations and compartmentalize those explanations into different categories of their psyche, it would definitely be the duality of our perception of the good and evil that would remain a major factor contributing to such personality becomes the dominant one amongst the others. A tyrant's personality would not be the dominant personality in a person created to be good, inclined towards goodness, or working for a higher purpose. If perception itself becomes a rationalization method with which one pays attention not so much at their sensory world, the eyes and what they see, the ears and what they hear, or the mouth and what it speaks. In fact, if a person did not pay attention to what comes out of their mouths in accordance with what other people might understand, they would have to have been either careless of the impact that their words have on others or how much value other people put to their speech and teaching. If a person does not use their perception to rationalize thoughts and figure out the truest of those thoughts, then that is akin to being thrown in limbo, being put to pause until you hear the voice of reason once again. It is no wonder that limbo is considered the land of the forgotten. Even if a giant hole was punctured through the ground with a giant laser, and every single step downward is a walk of thousands and thousands of years, each year being another butterfly effect gravity of changes to the world, even if we could distinguish every possible outcome of every tiny detail and decision, God would still have an infinite possibility pool to choose from for how our world will continue operating. In other words, if science was able to determine some changes in the world by relying on scientific evidence and scholarship to project the future of the world, we would not even be able to scratch the surface. Especially if the surface is a giant sphere containing all the possible probabilities, and possible outcomes. They still extend far into the magnificent unknown boundary of knowledge, which in itself is surrounded by the simple-minded concept of infinity. It is like a sphere surrounded with limits that can never be breached, like a container which holds all the knowledge necessary for the world to operate and the knowledge required for it to function based on God's will upon it to be governed. It was described as an elevated hierarchy of 7 heavens, one on top of the other, and knowledge flows from its top to its bottom. Orders and commands come down upon it from the top to the bottom with a single word: to be. When Shakespeare spoke about it in his poem, he categorized it into a binary categorization: to be or not to be. But this categorization is only viable with human frameworks of understanding. You either choose to be something or you don't. Then you are essentially made to weigh out the possibilities and the morality of certain actions, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. It is being, as in the sense of struggling, to, and patience in the face of the struggle. In fact, it is the way we act towards fortune, or what we call to be our destiny. It is not also the case that we are made to fight our demons by carrying arms against them along with our troubles and conundrums, that by fighting them we end them, as though we can only become something by, in fact, ending our troubles. Troubles would not be endable by mere humans, and therefore to be or not to be can only be used to describe how to be patient in the face of calamity, or to end something that is already in existence is to know that thing's state of finality, which cannot be determined by human instincts or rationality alone. In order to end world hunger, you have to know where world hunger would lead the world. It is currently being viewed as a bad arbiter of theodicy, as though world hunger would be the weapon some would use to formulate a ridiculous claim about God. Theodicy, if approached with the mindset of a judge rather than a believer, would turn tail and backfire. If you come to theodicy from the perspective that you will be finding all the things that are wrong with the world and blame the world for it, then sure, that's a one-way ticket to hell. If people who are oppressed and those who claim to have been oppressed in the land come together, crying out for justice from God, it is not unlikely that the only response given would be, "You were already told about this." Had those who claim to have been oppressed not complained to God, it would have been better for them. Isn't God's earth spacious enough for you that you would leave your land and be able to sustain your own selves in some other place? Why then would you cling to a land though you are its actual inheritors, who would never die on top of it? Why would you not believe in the signs you are being shown? Why would you wait to prepare your case to present it to God? If you continue through life with the belief that you would be able to have any say against any testimony that God would present against you, as Job is portrayed to have been doing through the book of Job, contesting his case against God during his life, if you continue living your life thinking that there will be no recompense, or that you will not be held accountable for everything you say and do, and even your thoughts, then why would God show you any mercy except by his sheer will and intent that contests you even about the goodness of God. Theodicy is but a birthplace of complaining individuals who would only be likened to dogs, barking their way into a determinate end. I would imagine them, if that was even permitted by the angels who will testify to their wrongdoing, contesting their cases and trying to prove to God, who is the ultimate good, that in life He allowed people to be evil. It is God's right, so to speak, to allow evil in the world. How then would you be able to identify a good person from a bad person? How would you identify a friend from a foe without the existence of evil? It is not very difficult to determine the moral principles embedded in every form of rationalized theology. If anyone has an ear, listen. It was no wonder that even the book of Revelations was based on factual evidence and rationality. When reason exists, it signals the presence of spirituality. The 5th of September 2024. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فإذا نفخت فيه من روحي فقعوا له ساجدين صدق الله العظيم. Then Allah touches Adam's back, and from his back He produces the souls of all humans who will live from his lineage. So Adam's ruh is from Allah's ruh, but the souls of all living humans after Adam is created from the single soul that Allah breathed into Adam. This means that our souls were not breathed into us by God, but created from Adam's soul, which God breathed into him. Is God capable of hatred? Is a curse that is placed on Satan because of his transgression and disobeying God's command because of his arrogance and pride similar to a curse that is placed on him because of hatred? Can humans place a curse on creatures? I don't know. If humans are created in such a way that they would be able to love and hate, sometimes in a non-balanced manner where someone would love to an impossible extreme or hate to an unbounded extreme. Could hatred be a righteous feeling? Are we supposed to hate our enemies? Hatred is a dark feeling which lacks direction. It is not satiated by actions or by results. It aims to do harm to the other without purpose. Hatred can change to sympathy, but I do not want to sympathize with the devil. I wonder what would happen if people hear him shrieking and screaming of pain when he is being tormented in hell. Would they feel sympathy for him? The dark hole.